I briefly want to talk about this story. This is in response to a Mississippi abortion law, which is going to the Supreme Court in December, where they are trying to ban abortions past 15 weeks. And in response to that, 500 female athletes have written an amicus brief to the Supreme Court telling them to throw out the case or to strike down this law, essentially saying it's unconstitutional and basically the worst thing that the world has ever seen, which I obviously don't agree with, but let's just find out exactly what they say. So there were 26 Olympians, 73 professional athletes, and 276 college athletes who contributed to this amicus brief, including, as you might have guessed, Megan Rapinoe, because she is very woke and has to make sure that everybody knows just how woke she is. So this is what she said. I am honored to stand with the hundreds of athletes who have signed on to this Supreme Court brief to help champion not only our constitutional rights, but also those of future generations of athletes, saying that physically, we push ourselves to the absolute limit. So to have forces within this country trying to deny us control over our own bodies is infuriating and un-American and will be met with fierce resistance. And you can already get the gist of what this brief is going to say. It's going to reiterate the tired claim that abortion is trying to control women's bodies, even though it's not what it's trying to do, and that it's unconstitutional to restrict or ban abortion in basically any way. So let's jump right in. There are a few quotes in this brief that I actually want to highlight to show what they're trying to say and how damaging I think this entire belief is to our country, but to young women specifically. So this is the brief in question. And as you can see, it's 73 pages long. So we're not going to read the entire thing, but there are a few snippets that I think are pretty important and highlight the gist of what they're trying to say here. First, if we go to the summary, they say that women's abilities to participate equally in economic and social life of the nation, including through professional sports, has been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives. So effectively, women are equal in today's society and they can achieve equal success because they need to have abortions. Saying that absent the right to access safe and legal abortion care and the ability of the woman to retain the ultimate control over her destiny and her body, women's sports would not be the enormous success they are today. Right here at the very beginning, they're effectively saying that women's sports are a success because women have the right to kill the unborn human life growing within them. Now, when you put it in that context, it sounds pretty bad, and that's because it is pretty bad. Saying that women's sports, the success of women in sports is because of their access to abortion, that's pretty messed up. But that's what the entire brief is going to say. And if you are telling that to young women that they can only be successful if they have access to abortion, if they can kill another human being, that's a pretty messed up talking point. At least I think it is. If we scroll down a little bit later, it says, which are those who have signed this brief, have exercised, relied on the availability of, or support the constitutional right to abortion care in order to meet the demands of their sport and unleash their athletic potential. Saying that they are united in their deeply held belief that women's athletics could not have reached its current level of participation and success without the constitutional rights recognized in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Once again, saying that women are only successful in sports because they can have abortions. That without abortions, apparently women's sports wouldn't be a thing. Which I guess if that meant that women's sports weren't a thing and we didn't have Megan Rapinoe, I mean, you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons here. I'm not against women's sports, but I am against Megan Rapinoe. So, just take what you can. So the last section I want to read here is a direct quote coming from someone who was an Olympic swimmer, I believe in 1992 or something. She said that when I was in college, I was on birth control, but I accidentally became pregnant. She was just starting to succeed in her sport and didn't want to take a year off because she was pregnant. As a result, I decided to have an abortion. I wasn't ready to be a mom, and having an abortion felt like I was given a second chance at life. Now, that phrase really stood out to me because she is talking about she had the ability to kill another human life And in her mind, that gave her a second chance at life because she effectively took the first chance at life of the unborn fetus. Now, I'm not trying to attack her personally, but that is a really messed up way at looking at abortion. This is not someone who you should look up to and have as a role model. This is messed up. And she continues, saying, I was able to take control of my future and refocus my priorities. I got better in school, I started training really hard, and that summer I won my first national championship. So because she had an abortion, everything just went uphill from there. She started doing better in school, she did better in her sport. It's just a win-win situation for everybody besides the life that was taken, which I think is pretty relevant and pretty important, but I'm not a woman, so I guess it doesn't matter what I think. Last thing she says is, my life would be drastically different if I had been pregnant and forced to sit out that race, because that race changed the course of my life. Now, I just want to reiterate what I've already said here in closing. The entire point of this 73-page brief is for women who are athletes and in many cases well-respected and well-known, who are looked up to by younger generations. This entire brief is allowing them to say, if it weren't for abortion, we would not be successful. That women need to have abortions in order to be successful. And not only is that incorrect, but that is a very dangerous thing to tell young women. Now, I'm not downplaying being pregnant, especially if you're an athlete. I have no idea how difficult that must be to go through a pregnancy and then try to come out the other side and go back to your peak level of athleticism. I don't understand that. I recognize that I'm not an athlete, and so that certainly is difficult. But just because something is difficult and could change the course of your life does not give you the right to end another life. I think that's what it effectively boils down to. And I also recognize that there are accidents and sometimes things happen. But if it is that important to you to not get pregnant, then you should be really careful about, your sexual activity. Make sure you're on birth control, double down with him wearing a condom. Just be really careful. There are ways to mitigate the risks of pregnancy. And if your career is that important to you right now, then I suggest you take all of the options that you can. That way you don't have to, take a year off because you're pregnant, and you also don't have to end another human life, because that's pretty messed up. So anyway, like I said, this is a couple of days old now, but I still felt like it was something I wanted to talk about and something that was relevant. Mostly because whenever Megan Rapinoe says anything, you should just take the opposite as fact, and this is another example. Women don't need abortions to be successful. Saying they do is a little bit sexist in my mind, to be honest, but again, what do I know? I'm just a guy. These aren't things that I'm supposed to be allowed to talk about, I suppose. Anyway, what are your thoughts on all of this? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.